At first glance, this may look like just another headline in a crowded news cycle. But make no mistake, what unfolded around Greenland is not a routine diplomatic footnote. It is a strategic signal, a signal about power, access, and the future shape of global security. When President Donald Trump stepped off Air Force One after his Switzerland trip, allies were uneasy, adversaries were alert, and Washington was quietly recalibrating its Arctic strategy. This is not about ice and snow. This is about leverage. The story begins with a phrase that immediately caught attention: total access. No end, no time limit. Those were not accidental words. They were carefully chosen. In international politics, language is currency. And when a U.S. president talks about unlimited access to a territory as strategically sensitive as Greenland, the world listens, especially Europe, Russia, and China. Greenland, geographically massive but sparsely populated, has long been a strategic outpost in the Arctic. It sits between North America and Europe, a natural bridge in both military and economic terms. During the Cold War, the United States already recognized its value, establishing the Thule Air Base under agreements with Denmark. What is different now is scale, ambition, and timing. According to reporting from major U.S. outlets, including the New York Times, the Trump administration explored proposals that would dramatically expand America's footprint on the island. These included additional troops, new military bases, and even discussions around sovereign claims over specific areas where U.S. installations would be located. Not ownership of all Greenland, but control of key pockets that matter most. The justification, at least publicly, is security. The Arctic is no longer a frozen backwater. Melting ice has opened new shipping routes, shortened trade corridors between Asia and Europe, and exposed vast reserves of rare earth minerals, oil, and gas. The region is fast becoming the next great arena of geopolitical competition. And in that competition, the United States sees Russia and China moving aggressively. Russia has reopened Cold War-era bases along its Arctic coast and invested billions in icebreaker fleets. China, calling itself a near-Arctic state, has poured money into research stations, infrastructure projects, and mineral exploration. From Washington's perspective, Greenland is the high ground. Lose influence there, and you lose visibility and control across the Arctic corridor. President Trump framed the issue bluntly, protecting the Arctic from Russian and Chinese influence. This framing matters. It shifts the debate from sovereignty to survival, from diplomacy to defense, and it creates political space for extraordinary measures, like expanding U.S. bases under existing treaties or renegotiating the boundaries of access. Denmark's response was swift and firm. The Danish Prime Minister made it clear: sovereignty is not negotiable. Greenland, though autonomous in many internal matters, remains part of the Kingdom of Denmark. Any suggestion of foreign sovereign claims, even limited ones, touches a historical nerve in Europe, especially at a time when borders are once again contested globally. Yet President Trump also appeared to soften the tone, suggesting that a deal might not include formal U.S. ownership of Danish territory. Instead, the emphasis shifted back to access, total security cooperation, unlimited basing rights, and full operational freedom. From a strategic standpoint, that distinction may be more symbolic than substantive. Control without ownership can still mean dominance. Crucially, an existing treaty already allows the United States to expand its military presence in Greenland. That legal foundation changes the game. Washington does not need to start from zero. It needs only to stretch the framework already in place. What is being negotiated now is scale, scope, and permanence. At the center of the military discussion is the so-called Golden Dome missile defense system, still in planning stages, but clearly envisioned as a future shield against advanced missile threats. Greenland's location makes it ideal for early warning radar, missile tracking, and interception infrastructure. In a world of hypersonic weapons, geography is destiny. But the Greenland story does not exist in isolation. It unfolded alongside another surprising announcement: President Trump launching a new international organization, the Board of Peace, following the Gaza ceasefire. Trump positioned himself as chairman, with veto power, an unusual structure that immediately raised eyebrows among diplomats and legal scholars. 50 countries are reportedly considering joining. The symbolism is unmistakable. The emblem places the United States front and center, outlined in gold. This is not multilateralism in the traditional sense. It is a power-centric model, where Washington sets the agenda and reserves ultimate authority. From a political standpoint, these moves share a common logic. They consolidate influence, bypass slow-moving institutions, and redefine rules on American terms. Greenland represents physical access and military leverage. The Board of Peace represents institutional access and diplomatic leverage. Together, they form a coherent strategy of control across both hard and soft power domains. Meanwhile, another headline broke: President Trump suing J.P. Morgan Chase and its CEO Jamie Dimon. The lawsuit stems from the bank allegedly dropping Trump as a client after the January 6th Capitol attack. On the surface, this seems unrelated, but politically, it reinforces a pattern: conflict with established power centers, whether financial, diplomatic, or institutional. 5 years after January 6th, the legal and political aftershocks continued to shape alliances and enmities. For Trump, the lawsuit is framed as retaliation against what he portrays as politicized corporate power. For critics, it is another escalation in a broader war between populist politics and elite institutions. Taken together, these developments paint a picture of an administration or political movement that sees the world as a series of leverage points. Territory, treaties, banks, international organizations, all are arenas of contest. And in each arena, the goal is the same: maximum access, minimum constraints. The immediate beneficiaries of the Greenland strategy are clear. The U.S. military gains expanded reach. Defense contractors stand to profit from new bases, radar systems, and missile defense projects. American strategic planners secure a stronger position in the Arctic chessboard. But there are costs. Denmark faces internal political pressure and external diplomatic strain. Greenland's own population, around 56,000 people, risks becoming a footnote in decisions that reshape their land. European allies worry about precedent. If sovereignty can be functionally diluted through access, what does that mean elsewhere? As of now, negotiations are described as just getting underway. That phrasing is deliberate. It lowers expectations while buying time. Nothing is finalized, but the direction of travel is clear. The United States is signaling that the Arctic is no longer optional. It is essential. This brings us to the present moment, a fragile balance between cooperation and confrontation, between legal treaties and political ambition, between the language of security and the reality of power. Greenland is the stage, but the audience is global, and the next act has yet to be written. To understand where this could lead, we need to step back and widen the lens. Greenland is not an isolated case. It is a symptom of a broader transformation in international politics. The post-Cold War assumption that globalization would dilute territorial competition is no longer holding. Geography is back. Borders matter again. And strategic real estate is once more a currency of power. If the United States secures what President Trump calls total access, the immediate military implications are profound. Expanded basing rights would allow continuous U.S. presence across the Arctic, from air and missile defense to naval and space-related operations. Surveillance coverage would increase dramatically, reducing blind spots in the Northern Hemisphere. In such a scenario, Russia would almost certainly respond by accelerating its own Arctic militarization. Moscow already considers the region central to its national security, particularly for its nuclear submarine fleet. Any perceived imbalance could trigger counterdeployments, raising the risk of miscalculation in an already tense environment. China's response would be different, but no less significant. Beijing may not challenge the U.S. militarily in Greenland, but it could double down on economic and scientific engagement elsewhere in the Arctic, particularly in Iceland, Norway, and Arctic shipping infrastructure. The competition would shift from direct confrontation to influence building. For Europe, the stakes are delicate. NATO allies broadly share U.S. concerns about Russia and China, but they are wary of unilateral moves that sideline European sovereignty. Denmark's firm public stance suggests a red line, yet behind closed doors, compromises on access and cooperation remain possible. One plausible future scenario is a rebranded agreement. No U.S. sovereignty claims, but expanded long-term basing rights framed as joint defense. This would allow all sides to save face while effectively delivering what Washington wants. It is a classic diplomatic maneuver. Change the label, not the substance. Another scenario is escalation. If negotiations sour and rhetoric hardens, Greenland could become a flashpoint in transatlantic relations. Public opinion in Europe matters. Any perception of coercion could trigger political backlash, complicating NATO unity at a critical moment. Economically, the Arctic's resource potential cannot be ignored. Greenland holds significant reserves of rare earth elements, critical for electronics, renewable energy, and defense technologies. Control over supply chains is the next frontier of economic security. Access to Greenland is not just about bases, it is about minerals. From this angle, the U.S. strategy intersects with industrial policy. Securing alternative sources of rare earths reduces dependence on China, which currently dominates global production. A stronger U.S. presence in Greenland could facilitate investment, extraction, and transport under Western-aligned frameworks. But extraction comes with social and environmental costs. Greenland's fragile ecosystem is vulnerable to large-scale industrial activity. Climate change has already transformed the island faster than most regions on Earth. Any future strategy that ignores local consent risks long-term instability. This is where the what-if analysis becomes critical. What if Greenland's population pushes back harder? What if autonomy movements gain momentum, demanding a greater say or even independence in response to external pressure? Such outcomes could reshape the entire negotiation landscape. There is also the institutional dimension. The creation of the Board of Peace signals a willingness to bypass established global governance structures. If successful, it could embolden similar initiatives, fragmenting international cooperation into leader-centric blocs. If it fails, it could deepen skepticism toward alternative institutions. The lawsuit against J.P. Morgan adds another layer. Financial institutions are not just economic actors, they are political ones. A prolonged legal battle between a former or sitting president and a major bank could have chilling effects on corporate political engagement, further polarizing the business environment. Strategically, these moves suggest a worldview grounded in transactional power. Alliances are tools, not values. Institutions are useful only if they deliver outcomes. Territory is leverage. This approach can yield rapid gains, but it also carries long-term risks of isolation and backlash. Looking ahead, the most likely outcome is not dramatic annexation or open conflict, but incremental normalization. Step by step, expanded U.S. presence becomes routine. New bases become old news. Access becomes assumed. And what once seemed radical becomes policy. The danger in such normalization is complacency. Strategic shifts of this magnitude deserve scrutiny, debate, and democratic oversight. When decisions reshape regions for decades, speed should not replace deliberation. In conclusion, the Greenland story is not about one deal or one president. It is about a world entering a new phase of strategic competition. The Arctic is warming, physically and politically. And as it does, the balance of power is being renegotiated, quietly, steadily, and with consequences that will echo far beyond the ice. The question is not whether Greenland matters. It does. The real question is how the choices made now will define security, sovereignty, and stability in the years to come. History will judge not just who gained access, but at what cost, and for how long.